Remarkable scenes. So you've got particularly young people protesting because the whole COVID policy's gone wrong. They've gone for zero COVID through lockdown, not through vaccination. The protest began in the country's Xinjiang province after 10 people were killed in an apartment building fire, and that was blamed on the lockdown restrictions because the fire brigade couldn't get in quickly. The province has experienced some of the country's longest lockdown restrictions, with reports of people left starving earlier in the year. We now hear people are being questioned and having their phones searched by police if they're thought to have been on any of these protests. They've been holding up, you saw their white pieces of paper, because the young people, particularly angry, they're not allowed to protest against anything in China. So they're called the white paper movement. And China's so repressive that if you type the phrase white paper into social media, it gets deleted immediately, apparently.
You've got to wonder at the courage of those who are demonstrating, because their faces are clearly visible.
Yeah.
And, China doesn't hesitate to take reprisals against people who challenge the regime, as Hong Kong found out. So,
what do you think it tells us about dealing with COVID, out of interest?
Well, as far as dealing with COVID went, I opposed some of the lockdown in this country, never mind a total lockdown. Vaccination was obviously the answer. Now, all governments made mistakes, but China went in one particular direction, and being China, it allowed no deviation at all. I think that they have a point. But what I'm delighted about is that they've got the guts to protest. There is actually the growth of protest.
On the COVID side, JJ, they've got their own vaccine. They didn't want Western vaccines, but their one apparently is only 50% effective. And because they were doing it through lockdown, a lot of people didn't get vaccinated. So they've now got an unvaccinated population. And apparently if they release their lockdown, they're going to have loads and loads of people getting it.
Yeah. So the problem, I think, President Xi Jinping has is that, as Anne says, he went down this one route and he's not going to change his mind on it now, even though all the evidence seems to be against him and would suggest now is the time to actually stop and maybe start letting people out bit by bit and getting people vaccinated. He's not going to change his mind now. So the only thing they can do is protest. I would say that they do protest in China, but normally at a local level. It's not normally so done en masse against the central government. And as Anne, you said, over there, they have facial recognition, biometrics. Even eyeballs can be recognised with all their high-tech security over there. So these people who are in the streets protesting, I think they're going to be in for some punishment.
I think they're only wearing masks because they have to by law. So they've obviously accepted that they will be recognised. And by the way, one of the things that's happened in China that's caused this is that people are seeing images of the World Cup. And if you're enjoying the World Cup football and you're watching this in China, and it's all perfectly normal, fans gathering, it makes you even more angry, JJ, doesn't it? Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah, so apparently in China they've been stopping images from the World Cup of people who are not wearing masks. There are some people out there wearing masks, but yeah, they've been raising
those... They only show the
for
play on the field.
Yeah.
They don't show the crowds.
Yeah, absolutely insane.
It really is. And I suppose if you're still in a lockdown and you see this, you'd be infuriated, Anne, wouldn't you?
Indeed you would. If you've been taught that, lockdown is the only answer, and then you see that the rest of the world actually is going along a completely different route. Yes, it would make you furious. It would also make you terribly upset. People won't have seen relatives and,
At the beginning, they were so tough. I remember if you broke lockdown rules, you were sent home and your front door was welded shut. That's how tough they were. Wow. Meanwhile, our Prime Minister has said the so-called golden era of relations with China is over. Let's have a look.
Now, let's be clear. The so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. But nor should we rely on simplistic Cold War rhetoric. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests, a challenge that grows more acute as it moves towards even greater authoritarianism.
It's a troubled old world, isn't it? Because America's not the country it was, not for now.
And it's not being led properly.
Right, and Russia's gone crazy, and China now is the enemy as well?
Yes, and it does feel all rather uncertain.
Is it time to rejoin the EU?
Certainly not. That wouldn't do us much good, would it? If you actually look at what Rishi is saying there, I don't think anybody is making the case you mustn't trade with regimes that we don't like, or you mustn't play sports with regimes we don't like. But expecting that alone to produce, if you like, the advent of civilization is, as he said, naive. So I think you've got a balance there. But actually, I would challenge him, challenge you, challenge, JJ, challenge anybody to say, OK, then, what do we do about them?
Well,
What do we do about China?
Well, trade the hell out of it, I would say.
I think it's dangerous or irresponsible for Rishi Sunak, though, to paint China as so openly as the enemy, because Xi Jinping's in power now. In 10 years' time, if the regime changes and they're open to trade, then actually we should be already there, having maintained the relationship with them throughout, rather than trying to jump back in and be like, oh, actually, now you guys have changed, we want to be part of it.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I remember Blair had the president of China over, and they had to. All the police were involved in stopping people protesting.
The Tibet protests?
Yes,
if you remember at the time.
Sort of
and the
hustled
police
away.
Took the banners from the Tibet protesters.
It's how you deal. We're a small country now. How we deal with these superpowers.
We are a tiny country.
I don't know.
And China now has so much influence in places like Africa. With their Belts and Bridges program, they are getting influence all over the world. We need to stay close to them. Better to keep your...
That's interesting.
And I think the one thing they have in common with Putin is that they're not afraid of military solutions. They're threatening.
So the next thing we hear, we wake up one morning and they've invaded Taiwan.
I think that is a likely situation.
Well, but then you'll be in the studio saying, "Oh, well, I said we should stay close to them. I was wrong."
No.
Yeah, you will.
I'll be in the studio saying, "Well, we need diplomacy.
You weren't close enough.
Encourage them."
Look, you do need. You need diplomacy. You need trade. You need sport. But you also need a huge amount of wariness.
Yeah. OK. Good point. Very wise, as always.